Greetings and welcome to A Contemplative Reader, where together we will explore the spiritual, the mystical, the mysterious, and the otherworldly in various forms of literature. For some time now, since I started my channel, I've thought someday I would record a video within my church, and so here today I am in the sanctuary. Considering the topic of today's video, I think that is appropriate. From my days as a lawyer, I still did bring my legal pad with me with my notes, so here we go. As the title to today's video indicates, I will be discussing stories where faith is part of a fictional world versus what I would call specifically faith-based fiction or Christian fiction. What do I mean by that? Well, I haven't read a lot of what is marketed as Christian fiction. So when an author, Shawn David Brink in this case, offered me to send me his indie pub novel entitled Bound by Blood, which is labeled as a Christian horror story, I said, sure, why not? Go ahead and send it to me. So I'll get back to my thoughts on how faith-based fiction can be described during my review of that book. Before I do that, though, I want to offer some thoughts on how fiction is used, faith is used in a fictional story without it specifically being faith-based fiction or Christian fiction. First category is where the author has a background in faith, and that seems to shape the themes and worldview of the story, but there really are no express references to that faith or even symbolism tied to that specific faith found in the story, at least that I can find. An example of that from a book series that I've started reading so far and covered in this channel is The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. So far I've read the Book of Three and The Black Cauldron, and you can find my videos devoted to those books on my channel. Now, Alexander, as I understand it, was a Christian and even at one time considered going into the ministry. But these books are really based on Welsh mythology as opposed to specifically being from his Christian faith. Although, based upon my reading of it, I think his Christianity has shaped the worldview of the story through themes such as mercy and sacrifice. Second category of books, I think, where faith is used in fiction without being specifically faith-based fiction, are books where the author brings in elements of faith and religion into the world which the author has created, either a fantasy world or a version of our existing world. Now, the fantasy world that I have read so far in this channel is the world created by Philip Chase, the Edan trilogy, Jormungand, where Chase has brought in elements of different world religions, including Christianity and Eastern religions such as Buddhism and Hinduism, and incorporated those faiths into the religions of that fantasy world. And as far as using world religions and incorporating into an alternate storyline found within our world, I think you need to look no further than Discovery by J.A.J. Minton, which I have also reviewed on this channel. Set in the 1990s in our world, but it is a cosmic horror story, and so the authors there bring in existing world religions and even create an alternate religion based upon the events of that story and what is going on there. Third category of books, I think, is where the author brings in elements of faith and religion through the use of symbolism. And for that, you need to look no further than Gene Wolfe. Again, been going through the Book of the New Sun on my channel, as well as reading some other stories of his. And his books are just steeped in the symbolism of his Catholic faith. And although it's been some time since I've read The Lord of the Rings, you can also find that as well in J.R.R. Tolkien's work. The example that comes to mind is that Frodo became the ring bearer at age 33, just as Jesus was the cross bearer at age 33. Stories where symbolism is even more direct, I think, obvious example of that is the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, where Aslan, the lion, has clear connections to the figure of Jesus Christ. That's not an exhaustive list of the ways in which faith is used in fiction without being specifically faith-based fiction. So I'm sure that there's many more out there you can think of. But on to what I would call then Christian fiction or faith-based fiction, and my discussion of Bound by Blood by Shawn David Brink. Just a quick description of the book. The primary characters of the book are two brothers, Jason and Seth, who are ensnared in a cult called the Kinship, led by a person named Cain. This cult is guided by the spirits, which are demonic beings which surround the Kinship. Now, one of the brothers, Seth, breaks free from the Kinship and finds Zion's Hill, a small local Christian congregation. And the rest of the story then describes the spiritual warfare which breaks out and is between the members of the Kinship and the spirits, as well as Zion's Hill, this Christian congregation. Now, unlike the categories of books where faith is used in fiction, which I've covered, Bound by Blood does not really have to rely on symbolism or allegory or use religion for world building to build a different world. Instead, a particular set of Christian beliefs is directly grafted into the storyline and used by the characters of the book. And so the Christian characters, although flawed, are clearly the good guys in the story, and the members of the Kinship and the spirits are clearly the bad guys in the story. It doesn't require a lot of unpacking to figure that out. So that's why I think this book is described as Christian fiction, where Christian is the adjective to describe that particular book. Who is this book for? Who might enjoy it? Well, number one, it's fast-paced. Again, there's not a need for a lot of world building or character development or setting up symbolism. The Christian church and its members are the good guys, and the Kinship and the spirits are the bad guys. So the story moves quite along, quite readily, without having to establish a lot of foundation for the storyline, since the parameters of the story are already built into the worldview of the book. I would also note that this book would be for people who are clearly rooted in what I would call American evangelical Christianity. And if that is your tradition, you will resonate with the language used to describe faith in this book. And I also would just note that if you like the faith portrayed in books such as Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness and the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, you're going to find some connections with this book as well. And if that is not your faith tradition, I'll get back to that in a little bit. What I would also note is that this book would be for people who like atmospheric horror stories that are not explicit in blood and gore. And you would like that aspect of this book. There's one chapter where the author, I think, does this very well, where the pastor of this church, Zion's Hill, is visited by what seems to be the spirit of a deceased loved one. And for people my age, I have flashbacks to that scene in the Salem's Lot miniseries, based upon the book, of course, by Stephen King, where the vampire is scratching on the window in the midst of the fog. And I had kind of recollections of that particular scene when I was reading that story, and it was well done, I thought. But back to the question, though, of how to read this book when you do not share the beliefs built into the story. For example, take me. I'm obviously a Christian, but some of the beliefs that were built into this story, that were held by the characters and used in the storyline, I objected to. For example, specifically with how God is described and portrayed as being involved in the events of this book, I didn't always agree with. So I think I will just say this about the readers, possible readers of this story, as well as readers of any other story described as Christian fiction or faith-based fiction. And that would be this, quite simply. Read it as fiction. If the book happens to align with your religious beliefs, great. If it does not, then you're going to have to decide whether or not you can separate your beliefs and objections to the beliefs portrayed in the story with the message of the book. As for me, I could do that for the most part with Bound by Blood, despite some of my objections, as I mentioned. I do generally prefer books with more world building and character development and symbolism, such as Gene Wolfe, as I mentioned. That's why I've reviewed so many of his books on my channel so far and plan to do more. But I will have to say, I thought that this book was a nice to read in the middle of the summer. Kind of a good palate cleanser in the midst of reading more dense, symbolism-packed books. Another thing I would just note, I would have made some different editing decisions in this book, but overall, if you fit in one of the categories of people that I think might enjoy this book, go ahead and give it a try. I think Shawn David Brink shows a lot of promise as an author. So thanks to Shawn for sending me this book, and thank you for watching. Peace be with you.